the sake of making sure we're on the same page with terminology, Philippe,
Sure.
What do you mean by policy and governance, and how are those used?
Yeah, so governance. Governance is all about the responsibility of the organization to comply with any sort of industry or government regulation. So, for example, whether it's FINRA or HIPAA or in healthcare also Joint Commission regulations. In terms of the retail industry, PCI compliance.
Right.
You have when there are third-party regulations that are requiring organizations to behave, for lack of a better term, in a certain way, you have to make sure that the policies of the organization are now in line with how mobility is going to impact things. When we talk about policies, again, there's a distinction between business and IT policies. If we talk about IT policies, that's such things as, enforcing VPN systems, enforcing geofencing of Bluetooth or cameras, right? The physical guts of the device itself, its capabilities. The easiest example are the IT policies that are baked into Microsoft Exchange in terms of remote wipe and lock and things like that.
Right.
That is separate from the business policies. And again, going back to the do's and don'ts, employees can bring in a device or employees cannot bring in their own device. We will support these kinds of devices. We will support these platforms. You must use a Bluetooth headset whilst driving, or you may not take a call for business while driving. These are the business rules around the business policies around how the employees at a workplace can leverage mobile technology for their business, both on and off work hours.
If I put myself in the shoes of the listeners out there today, this can all sound quite overwhelming and complex.
It is. That's the problem.
But what are there must be solutions available out there or strategies where somebody's already thought this all through and have these all built into an application of sort. What are you seeing out there?
Well, so I don't think there's necessarily an application of sort, especially when you're trying to figure out how you're going to wrestle with mobility in the workplace. What we recommend is that organizations create a mobility team. Because here's the other challenge, Kevin, and again, you know this as well as I do, that where does mobility live in the organization? Is it part of the IT department? Yes. Is it part of the telecom department? Yes. Well, is it also in the line of business? Absolutely. But then there are HR and legal consequences. And obviously, this falls also into the lap of the CFO. So who's going to have responsibility for mobility in the workplace? Well, because it permeates through so many different parts of an organization, we make the argument that you need to have a cross-functional team with a chief mobility officer who actually has a mandate from the C-level, hence why the new CMO, if you will, chief mobility officer, right? It is a daunting task because there are so many buts or, what ifs. So we provide also as a resource an enterprise mobility policy guidebook. And it's not a do's and don'ts. It's more of a, hey, have you thought about this? We're not going to tell you what to do. Every organization is going to have its own approach to handling this, but at least make them aware of considerations that they should take into account.
Oh, don't you like creating those checklists? I know I have one checklist for mobility, enterprise mobility assessment that's 17 pages long, but I'm just glad I don't have to answer the questions that I have in that checklist.
It's a lot easier to play almost Monday night quarterback, right? And Monday morning quarterback rather, and say, hey, here are the things you got to think about. You don't need to actually do it yourself. It's a lot easier. Yeah, it's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, goodbye, good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, so next, let me move on to another area and another question here. How do companies decide when they should buy or build or subscribe to an enterprise mobility application? because this is a big deal. If you lined up all the vendors out there, you would see a whole lot of different models, and you may not even find the application you need.
And you're spot on, Kevin, but the problem gets even more complicated when you look at mobile middleware solutions, because there are a number of different vendors out there, and they have each their own unique approach to addressing the development and deployment of applications in the workplace. But unless you are a complete expert on all those platforms, sometimes it's very hard to see the difference between them. It's a very confusing environment right now. But let's just take it at the highest level. Do you build something yourself? Do you use a mobile middleware platform? Or do you take something off the shelf? Well, let's take that question and take out the word mobility from the equation. Say, when you're deploying applications in the workplace, are you going to build them yourself? Are you going to use a middleware solution? Or are you going to use something that's available off the shelf? The answer is yes. You're going to do all three. Okay? You're not going to go build your own productivity suite, right? That's why we go and buy Microsoft Office, for example.
Right.
In terms of middleware, obviously big organizations out there, whether it's IBM, Oracle, SAP, whomever, big middleware stacks that you can use within the organization. And regardless, you're still at times going to want to create your own custom applications. So the answer of what is the best approach is, unfortunately, it depends. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to create a marketing, a B2C application in terms of having a way to have customer engagement, you may absolutely want to create a custom application. Go to a third party and do that. Maybe you want to leverage the unified communications, the conferencing platform you may have, or the WebEx platform, and I'm using WebEx as Kleenex at this point, right?
Right.
Well, you can go download a free application off of the App Store and use it, right? So that's a prepackaged, canned application. That's great. But here's the interesting question. What happens when ISVs are going to want to start selling those applications directly to the enterprise?
Right.
The consumer app store becomes then the intermediary, and in one respect may become a roadblock. So eventually organizations are going to have to also consider how are they going to buy in bulk prepackaged mobile applications, and that's going to become an issue moving forward.
Yeah, I recognize the same kinds of categories as well, Philippe. Mm-hmm. And I would say, here's my advice to my clients and readers out there, is that look for the simplest, low-cost solution that can accomplish huge chunks of your requirements and adopt that first.
Pareto Optimality, Kevin, 80-20 rule.
Absolutely, because oftentimes you can even get mobility in a cloud that you can subscribe to that's secure, it's standard. There's some already existing integrations with SAP Workflow and Oracle Workflow and some of these others, and that's all done, and you can just subscribe to it on a monthly or yearly basis for how many users you want, and you can accomplish a huge amount for just a subscription. You don't have to set up anything other than assign some people to help with initial integrations, especially if you have some customization in there. But other than that, you can just start assigning people to subscriptions that you have. That would be, that way you might be able to address huge chunks of your requirements internally. But in most large multinational companies out there, you're going to have the services into the business, the transportation into the business, perhaps the manufacturing and warehouse. Each of those will have to think again, is there something off the shelf, or is this a unique business process that's actually a competitive advantage to our company? So you're not going to find that as a pre-existing package. We're going to create that ourselves or contract with somebody that will create this, that will let us automate what's currently a competitive advantage for us.
Well, absolutely, and that's the example you just gave there is a prime example of where an organization would consider using a middleware solution. Multinational, million or billion-dollar organization may very well find the value in the scalability that you can get by using a middleware solution. But to your point, sometimes the off-the-shelf applications may not be exactly what they need. And so then you either have to customize that middleware app, or you just say, to heck with it, I'm going to build one on my own. And again, on the flip side, you may say, hey, what's available in a prepackaged container is exactly what I need. But here's the question for you, Kevin. What is an app? What is a mobile app? There's so many definitions out there around what an application is, and especially it gets confusing in terms of web-based mobile applications, HTML5 applications, native applications, right? Hybrid applications, right?
Yeah, I've run into that issue where I was corrected several times earlier this week because one of the vendors out there, Webelo, they actually just create one mobile client, and so that would be what they call their app, and it's just one thing. Yet, within that container, that mobile client, they can load dozens and dozens and dozens of different apps inside one container. But they like to say, no, it's just one app on your iPhone or your BlackBerry or your Android. It's just one app, but you can load it with as many business processes as you want.
And in that very same vein, Kevin, some organizations are talking about the applications that they can create where they're really not applications. They're just views on forms that are available in other back-end systems.
Ah, got it.
Right? So the question becomes, what is an app? And what are you trying to accomplish with it? That's why I suggest organizations think more about tasks, not applications, because mobilizing an application, what does that mean, right? And again, we've already talked about there are so many different methods of doing that. But if you want to mobilize your inventory tracking, that's a task, right?
Right.
You'll build an app to do that, but let's focus more on the end game, the what, not the how.
Right. And then I would add to that, just to identify another category of enterprise mobile solutions. There are some mobile solutions that are focused completely around field services. And when you talk to those guys out there in the world, they often know more than individual field service organizations what needs to be done because they're seeing a cross-section of field services from around the world. And a lot of these guys may have been doing it for 10 or 15 years as well. So you go and look at their applications, and it may, in fact, provide you with a lot of functionality you've never even dreamed of yourself because you didn't have it. But all of a sudden you're looking at how to really use location-based services in a service sector. How can you pre-notify your customers that you're arriving within 5 minutes of their location so they can be ready for you? And all these things can be pre-built into it. So, there's all kinds of categories, some of which there's so much intellectual property already built and available for you that you would be silly to try to start that and do it yourself.
Absolutely agree. I mean, it's all about trying to, again, it's going back to that mobility team and doing the internal assessment, focusing on trying to better understand how you're going to want to improve whatever business process, recognizing then that you're going to have to most likely re-engineer some of that business process because of what mobility can do for you and how that's going to change the fundamentals of your work.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today and listening to our podcast.